Welcome everyone, this is Honest Restart, and today I want to talk about the possibility of DLC for Metroid Dread. We've been loving the game's doing really well apparently, but now, a lot of us are finishing the game, playing through it again, or a third time, really enjoying this full complete package, and it's just so fun to replay, but of course, we want more. So then, could we get more? Could there be DLC for Metroid Dread? Well, I think there's a good chance of it, so we're going to be talking about that today, how it could happen, when it could be announced, and what kind of content this DLC could entail. Now before we jump into things, let me very quickly talk about my social media. You may see a few different things here on screen, you can check that all out, it is linked in the description below, and of course, if you like what you're seeing here, you can subscribe. So why am I talking about the possibility of DLC for Metroid Dread? Is there some sort of rumor or article out there suggesting so? No, not yet. But if you simply consider the fact that Metroid Dread is a popular game that seems to be selling well, then that already, I feel like, puts it in the conversation for potentially being DLC. If you look at most published Nintendo games that have come out during the Switch era, pretty much all of them have had some sort of DLC, or at least a large majority of them. Look at the games from 2017, Breath of the Wild had DLC, ARMS had DLC, Splatoon 2 had DLC, Mario Rabbids Kingdom Battle had DLC, Pokken Tournament had DLC, even Mario Odyssey had DLC, although it was free. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, also DLC. Now looking at 2018, Kirby Star Allies, that had DLC. Super Mario Party eventually got a free update. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, there's been tons of DLC for that. Mario Maker 2, it had its updates. Fire Emblem Three Houses, it had paid DLC. Astral Chain, I can't think of any DLC, so that's one to consider. Link's Awakening, that didn't have any DLC, but that was a remake. Ring Fit Adventure, that got DLC. Luigi's Mansion 3, that got DLC. Pokemon Sword and Shield, that got DLC. People weren't sure if a Pokemon game would get DLC, but because it was a brand new entry in the series, an actual mainline installment and not a remake, well, they gave it DLC. Animal Crossing New Horizons, that's getting DLC. Paper Mario the Origami King, I can't think of that one getting DLC, so that's one to consider. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, DLC has been coming out. And even looking at games coming out this year, new Pokemon Snap, that's getting DLC. Anyways, point is, most Nintendo games that are being published on the Switch, that are exclusives, that aren't remakes or reimaginings or Wii U ports or something like that, if they're like brand new installments for their main core series, they're getting some level of DLC, usually paid, sometimes just some free updates. So with that fact alone in mind, there's already a high probability that Metroid Dread is going to get DLC because that's how most Nintendo games are during the Switch era. So I think absolutely there could be a DLC for that reason alone. But is there any other reason to think that Metroid Dread could get DLC? Well, I would argue yes. So recently we just got a demo to come out for Metroid Dread. The game's been out for a few weeks, but we're still seeing demos coming out and new trailers and new dialogues and more things being said about Dread. Nintendo's still hard pushing and marketing Metroid Dread. They want this game to succeed. They want to continue the conversation for Metroid Dread. That's exactly what they're doing right now. So then with that in mind, what would be a great way to do that? DLC. That's how it worked for Smash Ultimate, that's how it worked for Fire Emblem, that's how it's worked for a lot of games. The DLC can be valuable not just because it itself sells, but also because it helps to sell the base software, keeps that conversation going. It's even more marketing and promotion. So once DLC is announced for Metroid Dread, that conversation is going to continue. It's going to continue that excitement, that hype cycle, and even more people are going to get in on Metroid Dread. So I think there's a pretty darn good chance that Metroid Dread's going to get DLC. But is it possible that it doesn't? Absolutely. There are some games that just don't get DLC, for whatever reason. Perhaps the producers and directors just don't have that in mind for their vision of the game, and if that's the case, then, well, it just won't happen. If Sakamoto doesn't think that Metroid Dread needs DLC, then maybe there won't be DLC. Although it's possible Nintendo higher-ups may pressure Yoshio Sakamoto and Mercury Steam to put in some DLC, and with a little bit of a push, maybe they'll argue ways to make it work, so it could still happen. But I'm just saying, if there isn't any sort of vision with that in mind, then it may not happen. But it certainly makes sense to add DLC because it will sell and it will help to continue the conversation of Metroid Dread, which will thus help that to sell even more so as well. So hopefully they do go in that direction because I think there's some fun things they can do with that. But how exactly would that work? What would DLC actually entail for Metroid Dread? Well, there's a few different ways they could potentially go. One way could be to sort of include just another area in the game that you can get to from some point, and it just offers like a little bit of a side mission. And perhaps the reward for beating this side mission would be an additional power-up that could help you progress through Metroid Dread with more speed or more power or just more stamina. But another possibility could be something of an epilogue mission. Maybe it's something you access outside of the main campaign. Maybe it's like a side thing. Maybe something similar to the epilogue story in Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. Even though that wasn't DLC, it came in with the package. Maybe they could do something like that, or like Bowser's Fury, same idea. A separate sort of mode where you access a different area. And considering how Metroid has worked in the past, there are certainly some things they can do. I already mentioned the idea of a side mission. What if it is just that? Like an additional mission that is somehow semi-related to Metroid Dread. So, for example, if we go back to the initial Metroid Prime, before all the events started on Talon 4, Samus was responding to a distress signal on this space frigate, this crashed, sort of destroyed space station. It hadn't crashed yet, but it was all destroyed, it was in ruins, and Samus was exploring that. That was meant as an introduction to the game, but it's separate from the rest of the world for Metroid Prime. So what if they had something like that for Metroid Dread? Just a separate area. It's an area separate from the rest of the game, but it tells its own little story and perhaps has some implications or connections to the story for Dread. And actually, I think maybe it could even be something similar to what happened on the Space Frigate. It's related to space pirates. So when we look at Metroid Dread, I'm not going to spoil too much here, but there are signs of space pirates. Kraid is in the game. Kraid was one of the big bosses for the Space Pirate Force, yet he's somehow imprisoned on planet ZDR. What if they tie in the space pirates here? Even though the space pirates are supposed to be entirely out, the existence of Kraid himself implies otherwise. So maybe they could have some sort of side DLC mission that brings that in. Maybe there are some remaining space pirates on the space station surrounding planet ZDR and Samus has to deal with them. Maybe they bring in some previous space pirate bosses. Maybe we get to fight Ridley at the end. That could be something pretty cool, pretty exciting. And maybe they could even tie in some more connections between this and Metroid Dread and what happened in the events leading up to Dread. Or perhaps they could even have some suggestion towards what's going to happen in the future for the Metroid series, be it the next 2D Metroid or even Metroid Prime 4. There's certainly a lot they could do here, and they could fit it in quite nicely, very easily, whether it's a side campaign that you access from the main menu, or it's just another area you access from the world of Planet ZDR. Either way could work, and either way I think fans would be very excited. I personally would prefer it to just be like a side mission, because I feel like the flow of the entire campaign in Metroid Dread is entirely fine. I like the way the world is designed. They probably could come up with a way to sort of just add it in there, but I like the idea of having just a separate sort of thing to do in this side mode, and maybe you could even bring in your account from the main game and you could use whatever power-ups you have at that time, and that could impact your ability to explore that side area even more so and do even more in it. And then at that point you kind of have this interplay between both the main campaign and this side DLC campaign. But anyway, if this DLC is going to happen, when will we find out? Really, it could happen at any point. If I had to guess, I would say it would have to happen within a year of Metroid Dread's release. If they wait longer than that, then I'll say it's probably not going to come. There are other Metroid games on the horizon, and Nintendo's probably going to focus on those. So this DLC needs to come sooner than later, or else they're just probably going to focus on other Metroid projects and just progress going in that direction, and that's it. But anyway, when could we maybe expect an announcement for this potential DLC? I would say it has to happen sooner than later. If Nintendo waits too long, I feel like the boat will have sailed. I think this is the kind of game that it has to happen within a year of its release, but also I think there's a need to do it sooner because supposedly there are multiple other Metroid games on the horizon, so I think you want this DLC coming out before those, and if rumors are true, a Metroid Prime remake or something like that's supposed to come out sometime next year, so hopefully this DLC is announced sooner than later if it's even coming. So with that in mind, I would say that they have to make a Dread DLC announcement by an earlier Nintendo Direct. That's assuming the Metroid Prime Remake or Prime Trilogy, something is coming out next year. So if that's the case, yes, by an earlier Nintendo Direct. If there is no other Metroid thing coming out next year, then they save the DLC and it could come out around the same time as Dread did this year. They can maybe do that if they really wanted to, but that's the latest I could see it sort of happening. But really what I'm hoping for here is that we do get like a Metroid Prime Remake or a Prime Trilogy sometime late next year, and to tide us over, we get the Metroid Dread DLC within about 6 months from now, and maybe they announce it at either an earlier Nintendo Direct or at the Game Awards. Considering how well reviewed Metroid Dread is, considering how well it's trending on social media, considering how people in general seem to really like this game and think it's a really, really good game, for me, it might be my personal game of the year. It could very well be nominated for a few different things at the Game Awards. And typically every year we see 2 to 3 announcements from Nintendo at the Game Awards. A DLC announcement for Metroid Dread would fit very nicely and might tie in really well to the nomination for Metroid Dread for something, maybe even Game of the Year. So that's what I'm kind of pulling for right now. I'm kind of hoping for a DLC announcement for Metroid Dread at the Game Awards, and if not then, perhaps an earlier Nintendo Direct, and if not then, well then maybe we're just not getting DLC, but I'm gonna hedge my bets and say that we are getting DLC for Metroid Dread, but we shall see. What do you guys think? Do you guys think we're getting DLC for Metroid Dread, or do you think we're just gonna have to wait for the next Metroid game to come out? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.